Welcome to the latest virtual Wayback podcast, where today we continue our celebration of America's 250th birthday, while also reflecting on the recently concluded month-long celebration of Women's History Month and the role of women in the forming of our country. So today we focus on four women who lived the American Revolution from very different positions. Martha Washington, who bore the burdens of war at the side of General Washington; Abigail Adams, whose pen and political mind moved constantly beside the public career of her husband; Grace Groudon Galloway, a Pennsylvania loyalist who saw in the Revolution not the securing of liberty, but the loss of law, property, and inheritance; and Mercy Otis Warren, writer, patriot, historian, and one of the keenest female observers of the Revolutionary age. These women did not speak with one voice. They did not believe the same things. They did not suffer in the same manner, nor hope for the same end. Yet each, in her own way, stood within the great questions of the age. What is liberty? What is loyalty? What is a woman's duty to family, to conscience, and to country? And when men speak grandly of rights, who is left to live with the consequences? Our conversation will be in three parts. First, in the year 1782. The war is not yet formally concluded. Victory has not settled every question. Old loyalties remain bitterly contested. Property has been seized. Families have been divided. Women, though shut out of formal power, have nonetheless carried influence, responsibility, and loss in ways the public record has too often softened or forgotten. Our guide in this exchange is Mercy Otis Warren. She is not a neutral observer, nor should she be. She believed in the American cause, wrote for it, and gave her talents to it. But she is also a woman of thought and judgment, capable of admiration, doubt, and severity in equal measure. She knows that history is not strengthened by flattery, it is strengthened by truth. The discussion should not be merely what the Revolution created, but what it demanded of the women who lived through it. Mrs. Warren, the conversation is now yours.
I thank you. We are told, often enough, that great events are made by great men. Yet I have lived long enough among revolutions to know that nations are also shaped by those who are not named in resolutions, who do not command armies, and who have no seat in any assembly, yet who bear the strain of principle in their homes and in their hearts. We are met in a season of uncertainty. Much has been risked, much has been lost, and not all are agreed that what has been done has been justly done. I would therefore have no hollow ceremony among us. Let each lady speak plainly, as her conscience instructs her. Mrs. Washington has known the privations of war, and the heavy constancy required of one joined to the commander of our armies. Mrs. Adams has long considered the cause of liberty with uncommon force of mind, and has not been backward in saying what she believes. Mrs. Galloway, standing upon different principles, has felt in her own person the harsh consequences of this contest, and may well ask whether liberty, as now pursued, has proved equally mindful of justice. I shall ask not what is convenient, but what is true, and so I begin with this. When this contest first rose in earnest, did you believe yourselves merely to be enduring the actions of men, or did you understand, even then, that women too had become actors in the fate of America?
This is Mrs. Washington. I cannot say, madam, that I considered myself in any such light at the beginning. My thoughts were directed to my family and to the care of my affairs at home. Yet as the war advanced, and as my husband's duties removed him so long from us, I found that what had once been private concern took on a different character. One does what must be done, without always naming it as consequence.
This is Mrs. Adams. I just heard Mrs. Washington express what many of us have felt, though perhaps I have been less inclined to leave it unnamed. When the men were absent, the burden did not merely increase, it altered. We were obliged not only to manage, but to judge, to decide, and to sustain. I could not persuade myself that such exertions were of no account in the public cause.
Nor should you, madam. I have long thought that the distinction between public and private has been much exaggerated, to the disadvantage of those whose labors are least acknowledged. I could not persuade myself that such exertions were of no account in the public cause.
This is Mrs. Galloway, if I may speak, though I find myself, in many respects, differently situated. I would say that women have indeed been drawn into this contest, but not always by persuasion, nor with equal justice. For myself, I neither sought nor welcomed such a role. Yet when authority shifted, and with it the security of property and law, I was compelled to act in defense of what I had long possessed without dispute.
You speak of compulsion, Mrs. Galloway. Do you hold, then, that others have acted under illusion rather than necessity?
I would not presume to judge the motives of others, madam. Yet I cannot but observe that what is called liberty by some has, in my experience, operated as dispossession. If women have become actors, it is in part because they have been made to answer for decisions not their own.
This is Mrs. Adams. There is truth in what you say, though I cannot follow you to the same conclusion. The times have required much of all of us. It is not to be denied that measures have been severe. Yet I have believed, and still believe, that the principles at stake justify a firmness which, in quieter seasons, might appear harsh.
Madam, I do not question that you believe it so. But I would ask, must justice yield entirely to necessity? Or is there some line beyond which even a righteous cause ought not to pass?
That is a question not easily answered, and perhaps not yet fully answered. But I would say this: submission to what we judged unlawful authority could not be the remedy.
This is Mrs. Washington. It has seemed to me, if I may add, that many things have been born in this contest which none would have chosen in calmer times. Whether in support of the cause or in opposition to it, there has been suffering which no one could wholly avoid.
This is Mrs. Warren. And yet, Mrs. Washington, suffering alone does not resolve the question of right. It appears to me that we are agreed on at least this, that women have not stood apart from these events. Whether by conviction, as Mrs. Adams has expressed, or by necessity, as Mrs. Galloway has endured, or by the steady discharge of duty, as you yourself have exemplified, they have been engaged. The question, then, is not whether women have acted, but how and to what effect. Mrs. Adams, you have said that women have judged as well as endured. Do you believe those judgments have been heard, or only borne in silence?
Madam, I would wish to say they have been heard, but I fear it would not be entirely just. We have spoken, certainly. I have taken the liberty, in my letters, to express sentiments which I thought neither improper nor unworthy of consideration. Yet whether those sentiments have been received with the weight they deserve is another matter. There is, I think, a habit, long established, of hearing women with patience, but not always with consequence. As an example, when I urged that the new code of laws might be more generous to women, more attentive to their rights, I did so not in jest, but in earnest reflection. Yet I was answered more with pleasantry than with principle. I do not say I was dismissed outright, but neither was I fully regarded.
This is Mrs. Galloway. Then in that, Mrs. Adams, we may find some common ground, though we stand upon very different principles. For I too have spoken, petitioned, argued, set forth what I believed to be lawful claims. And I continue to do so, though with little encouragement. My estate has been taken under new authority, and I have sought redress not through defiance, but through the very forms of law which are said to justify these proceedings. Yet I find that a woman's claim, however grounded, does not easily command attention when set against the determinations of those now in power. I am told to wait, to trust that justice will in time be done. But time, madam, is a costly remedy when one's property, and with it one's independence, has already been removed.
It is a hard condition you describe, and I would not dismiss it. Yet I cannot think that all recourse is denied you. The establishment of order must, I hope, bring with it a more regular administration of justice.
I should be glad to believe it so, but I cannot help observing that those who now speak most confidently of justice are the very persons by whom mine has been suspended.
It would seem, madam, that whether one supports the present cause or opposes it, the condition of speaking as a woman is not so very different.
This is Mrs. Warren. You touch upon a difficulty that cannot easily be set aside. If liberty be a principle, it must bear examination in its application, not merely in its declaration. Mrs. Adams, do you believe that the language of liberty, so often employed in this contest, has yet been fully reconciled with the condition of women?
No, madam, I cannot say it has. And yet, I would not therefore abandon the cause. I have thought it better to press forward, to improve what may be improved, rather than to reject what offers, at least, the possibility of enlargement. If we wait for perfection before we act, we shall wait forever.
This is Mrs. Galloway. But if we act without regard to consistency, do we not risk establishing new injustices under the name of reform?
This is Mrs. Washington. It may be, Mrs. Galloway, that both are true in some measure. I have seen enough of this war to know that few things proceed exactly as intended. Yet I have also seen that without resolution, little would be accomplished at all.
Then we are left, it appears, with no simple conclusion. Women have acted, but are not fully recognized. They have judged, but are not fully heard. They have suffered, but are not equally restored. We speak now in the midst of events whose end we cannot yet see. Each of us holds, according to her own experience, some portion of what this contest has required, and what it has cost. But time, which tries all things, will render its own account. When the history of this revolution is written, it will not be asked only what was declared, but what was endured, and by whom. Whether the part borne by women shall be fully remembered, or only lightly noted, I cannot say. But I think we may be certain of this, that the consequences of what is now done will not end with us. And so, we must leave the question, for the present, unresolved.
Grace Groudon Galloway died in 1782 and did not live to see how these questions were answered. Up until her death in 1782, while the war still lingered in uncertainty, she had remained engaged in the struggle not of arms, but of law, petitioning, arguing, and seeking the restoration of property she believed had been unjustly taken. Her case was not singular. Across the former colonies, loyalists, men and women alike, faced confiscation, displacement, and the slow machinery of new governments determining what justice required in a nation still defining itself. But for women, the path was often more uncertain still. Bound by legal traditions that did not easily recognize their independent claims, and navigating systems shaped almost entirely by male authority, women like Galloway were required not only to prove their case, but, in some measure, their standing to make it. So, we move now 20 years forward to 1802. The war is no longer uncertain. The United States stands established, its government formed, its course begun. The urgency of survival has given way to the work of defining what exactly has been created. Martha Washington approaches the end of her life, having witnessed both the struggle for independence and the fragile beginnings of the republic her husband helped to lead. Abigail Adams has seen the promise of liberty carried into governance, and has lived long enough to measure what was gained and what remained unchanged. Mercy Otis Warren, ever observant, has turned her attention from advocacy to reflection, considering not only what was achieved, but what may have been compromised along the way. And so the conversation resumes, no longer in the heat of conflict, but in the quieter, more searching light of hindsight. What, after all, was the role of women in the Revolution? And what, if anything, did it change? Mrs. Warren, we return to you.
We meet now under circumstances much altered from those which once engaged us in the midst of uncertainty and contest. The war, which pressed so heavily upon every private concern, has long since concluded. The government, then only imagined, has been established and carried into operation. And you, Madam, Mrs. Washington, have borne a station which united the expectations of a new nation with the memory of its late commander. Mrs. Adams, you too have moved not merely in the contemplation of public affairs, but within their immediate execution, and have observed at close hand how principles are translated into practice. Time has thus placed you both at a greater remove from the anxieties of that earlier period, and has, perhaps, afforded a clearer view of what has been gained, and what may have been left unaltered. We spoke some 20 years past of the part borne by women in the Revolution, of what they endured, what they judged, and what they might reasonably expect in return. It was then a question still unfolding, and each spoke from within the immediacy of events. But time has a way of correcting or confirming our earlier impressions. I would ask you, therefore, not only what has been realized, but whether you now view your own part, and that of women more generally, differently than you did in those earlier days. Do you find that your expectations have been fulfilled or moderated? And in passing from revolution to establishment, from hope to experience, do you judge that the influence of women upon that great contest has been rightly understood, or has it, even now, been too lightly regarded? And I would add, As I have said in the past, there are conditions still existing among us which do not sit easily beside the principles so often declared. We have spoken much of liberty as a general right, yet there remain entire classes for whom it is not so considered. I cannot but think that such inconsistency, if long continued, must in time call into question the sincerity of our professions.
This is Abigail Adams. Madam, I do not deny the force of what you observe, yet I would ask, what remedy do you propose that would not endanger the stability so lately secured? There are difficulties, both moral and practical, which cannot be resolved at once without hazard.
And yet, if they are not resolved at all?
I would not say they will not be resolved, but that they must be approached with care. There are questions which, if pressed too suddenly, may produce consequences more immediate than beneficial, and we must trust that what has been begun may yet be improved.
This is Mrs. Washington, and I would like to remind you both that there are many things I and many others believe which are better approached with caution than with haste. What has long existed is not easily altered, and those who depend upon it are not easily persuaded.
And so we find ourselves in a position not entirely unlike that in which we first spoke, possessed of principles widely affirmed, yet not fully realized. If liberty itself remains thus imperfectly extended, it is perhaps less surprising that the condition of women has not been more substantially altered. And yet, I cannot think their part so slight as to be dismissed, nor so transient as to be forgotten. Mrs. Adams, you have said that women were essential, though not acknowledged. Mrs. Washington, you have observed that what was done has been more felt than declared. I would ask you now whether you believe that such contributions, though presently understated, will in time produce more visible consequence, or whether they are destined to remain, as they now appear, a foundation upon which others stand, without being themselves brought into view.
This is Mrs. Adams. I cannot think them entirely lost, madam. What is once known, even imperfectly, does not wholly disappear. Women have in these years exercised judgment, responsibility, and fortitude beyond what was formerly expected. Those who have seen it cannot entirely forget it. Yet I do not deceive myself that such remembrance will quickly alter established forms. It may work gradually, through influence, through example, but not, I think, through any immediate transformation.
This is Mrs. Washington, and I would hope that what has been done may not be without effect. But I have never thought that such matters are best advanced by pressing them too strongly. There is a kind of regard which grows more naturally when it is not demanded. Those who have seen it cannot entirely forget it. Yet I do not deceive myself that such remembrance will quickly alter established forms. It may work gradually, through influence, through example, but not, I think, through any immediate transformation.
And yet, Mrs. Washington, if it is never demanded, it may never be granted. Those who have seen it cannot entirely forget it. Yet I do not deceive myself that such remembrance will quickly alter established forms. It may work gradually, through influence, through example, but not, I think, through any immediate transformation.
That may be so, but I think it must be suited to the disposition of the time.
Then we are left, it seems, between expectation and restraint, between what may be justly claimed and what may prudently be pursued. So now we have now considered, at some distance, what was once immediate, what was once uncertain, and have found, perhaps, that time clarifies less than we suppose. Women have borne their part in the revolution. Of that there can be no doubt. They have sustained, advised, endured, and in some instances suffered losses not easily repaired. Yet the acknowledgement of that part remains incomplete. The principles for which the contest was undertaken have been established, but not universally applied. And so we are left with a question which time alone has not resolved: whether the exertions of women and the inconsistencies we have observed will in the years to come compel a more complete understanding of liberty, or whether they will remain, as now, partially seen, partially considered, and only imperfectly addressed.
In the years that followed, the young republic continued to define itself, not only through its laws and institutions, but through the convictions and disagreements of those who had helped to bring it into being. Alliances shifted. Friendships, once strengthened by shared purpose, were tested by diverging views of what that purpose required in practice. Among those affected were two women whose minds had long moved in close correspondence, Abigail Adams and Mercy Otis Warren. They had once written to one another with warmth and mutual regard, united in their support for the American cause and in their confidence that it might produce a more just and virtuous society. Each admired in the other a seriousness of thought and a willingness to engage the great questions of their time. But as the revolution gave way to governance, agreement proved less certain. Mercy Otis Warren grew increasingly uneasy with the direction of the new federal government. She feared that power, once consolidated, might distance itself from the very people in whose name it had been claimed. Her writings reflected a concern that the revolution's principles, so forcefully declared, might be narrowed in their application or compromised in their execution. Abigail Adams, though not uncritical, came to accept the necessity of stronger national structure. She had seen, at close hand, the fragility of the early republic, and believed that order and continuity were essential to preserving what had been won. These differences were not slight. Warren's published history of the Revolution, with its pointed judgments, was very critical of both John Adams and Abigail. What had once been candid correspondence became for a time strained and distant. Time, however, does not only divide, it also diminishes what once seemed immovable. The steadying voice of Martha Washington has now passed from the scene, her long life, so closely bound to the fortunes of the Revolution, brought to its quiet conclusion in 1802. What remains are voices that must reckon not only with the nation that was formed, but with the absence of those who once bore it alongside them. And yet, the bond between Warren and Adams was not entirely broken. Years passed. The sharpness of disagreement softened, if not wholly resolved. Letters resumed, more cautious perhaps, but still marked by recognition of a shared past. Now, in the year 1814, we find them both near the close of their lives. They are no longer speaking from the urgency of revolution, nor from the immediate work of government, but from reflection, shaped by experience, tempered by disappointment, and informed by a long view of what has endured and what has not.
Mrs. Adams, we have spoken of events and of memory, but I would now have us speak plainly of impact. Not in general terms, but of those we have known. Mrs. Washington, yourself, Mrs. Galloway, and, if you will permit it, myself. What did we, in truth, contribute to the Revolution? Not what was felt, not what was endured. What was changed because we were there?
Madam, that is a question more easily asked than answered, but I will not avoid it. Mrs. Washington gave to the cause something it could not have supplied for itself: continuity. In the camp, in the darkest seasons of the war, she preserved order, civility, and a sense that what was being fought for had not already been lost in the struggle to secure it. Men may fight, but they do not always know how to sustain. She did. I, on the other hand, did not alter the laws. I did not secure the rights I once urged. But I did something else. I made it impossible, within my own circle, that women be regarded as without judgment. My husband, and others, could not think on matters of government without hearing, at least in private, a woman speak of them with seriousness. If that did not produce immediate change, it altered expectation. And expectation precedes reform. But I would ask you now, Mrs. Warren, what of your own impact? You did not confine yourself to private counsel. You wrote publicly. You judged openly. What did that change?
It changed, I think, what was possible for a woman to do. Before the Revolution, a woman might think, but she was not expected to publish, her thoughts on matters of government. I did so, not without consequence, but not without effect. If I did not alter the structure of power, I challenged the assumption that women must remain silent in its consideration. And I think, in no small way, that helped me and other female voices persuade the men in power, and that made a great impact on what we created and the voice given to women. Even if we didn't always agree, our collective voices played a pivotal role in what we have become as a nation. And finally, Mrs. Adams. I am now wondering what was the impact of Mrs. Galloway? She stood not with the revolution, but against it. Did she have impact on the revolution or the role of women?
She did, though not in the manner she would have wished. Her petitions, her claims, her insistence upon legal right, these revealed something the revolution was less inclined to acknowledge: that liberty, when secured, was not applied equally. But though she didn't live to see resolution, society's perception of women and their legal status changed because of her efforts. As we have agreed, change is slow. But her arguments about legal standing and the rights of women and property have, in some ways, changed how we view women over the past 30 years. She should get tremendous credit for that. She effectively demonstrated that women, particularly those without formal authority, were less able to defend themselves within systems constructed by men. A loyalist man might negotiate, reclaim, or remove himself. A loyalist woman, especially one tied to property but not fully recognized in law, had fewer means.
Then I must say it plainly, that women who opposed the revolution were treated not only as adversaries, but as dependents without full standing. So maybe her work, in a small way, was more impactful than mine, yours, or Mrs. Washington. I don't know if that is true, but it is at least worth the question.
And that concludes our podcast roundtable with 4 remarkable women. And while it also concludes our celebration of Women's History Month, we hope it has effectively continued our celebration of America's 250th birthday. We hope you join our virtual Wayback community and have your own conversations with the people who shaped our nation at virtualwayback.com.